Hey everybody, can you hear me okay?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, excellent. So today we're talking about sales strategy. And I just wanted to quickly just say thank you so much to 500 for having me join you. Um, I am a really big fan of the work that you do at 500 Startups Global, and super excited to be here. And without further ado, let's jump in and talk sales. All right. When I find usually when I bring up sales, there's a few people in the room who go, "Yes, sales." And they get so excited. All right. So quickly, I'm not going to be able to see, but I want everybody else in the room to see you. When I say sales, who's so excited? Like put your hands up if you're one of them. If you're super excited about sales. And look around and see there's probably not nearly enough people that if you want your startups to succeed, you kind of know you have to do sales. But when I say sales, a lot of people actually say sales. Oh my God, do I have to do sales? Show of hands on this one. And then I won't make you admit this. But when I do this talk, and I have worked with groups in 13 countries now, 25 talks at accelerators. When I say sales, there's always somebody who goes, sales? Oh my God, do I have to do sales? And it's just so scary. And I won't make you stick your hands up and admit it, but I know you're here. And I just want to say, I see you. It's okay. We're going to talk about a few things today that will help relieve some of this anxiety. But before we do that, I want to talk about why this anxiety happens for founders. This anxiety is likely to happen because when you hear me say sales, you actually think about this guy, right? Now, I don't know if you've ever come to the US and tried to buy a used car at a used car lot, but this is somebody you are likely to run into. And I'm sure you have a version of this in your countries. And I'm sure that you have easily can picture what I mean when I say sales and people think, oh my God, I got to do sales like this guy. A lot of founders are thinking about usually one of two things. One, I don't want to be him. Or two, I don't want to deal with him. I don't want to hire a salesperson. I don't want to do sales. Sales is sticky and greasy and nasty, and it's not what I want to do. Okay. Now, this is really inconvenient because if we're running a B2B startup, we're going to have to do sales. And honestly, any type of startup you're running, we're going to have to do some kind of sales, right? And so today I thought the best thing we could do is a little bit of exposure therapy, and we can have our sales guy from the used car lot who is limited in how much we trust him. We're going to have him join us to actually talk about not best practices today. We're talking about the worst practices. And if you stick with me, I think we're going to have a lot of fun. And we're also going to learn quite a bit. These four really bad types of advice actually lead us to four things I think will leave you in a much better place in the next 25 minutes or so. So, with that, I'll tell you just a little bit more about me so you know what my bias is. I am an operator and a sales leader, and I have seen the $0 to $100 million journey at three different startups as an operator, as a advisor, and also as an executive coach, where I've worked with teams as large as 600 sales reps and as small as two founders in a garage to figure out their sales strategy. Like I mentioned, I've done this talk or talks like it in for about 15 or 16 funds. This will be country 13, and this is my first trip to Taiwan. Please have me back in real life. I would love to come and see it in person. In addition to running my own startup, which is called Reachable, where we have 6 executive coaches that are all former revenue leaders. You can see here some of the logos of places I've talked or engagements I've done. I've been an advisor for companies like Envision and Airbnb and Lyft. I've done sales training at companies like Asana 500. I've worked with YC founders. I've worked with Andreessen Horowitz founders. And you know what? All over the world, people point back to the 500 Global program. So that's why I keep coming back. People keep pointing at the program saying this is some of the best founder education in the world, which is why I'm here. But unfortunately, we're talking about bad advice. All right, bad advice number one is this: always be closing. Now, you may be familiar with this one. This is something that a lot of founders like to say to each other. We talk about it with fundraising, we talk about it in sales, we joke about it from the movies. There's several films that you can point to, including a place where Alec Baldwin is telling you can only get your steak knives if you're always closing, right? And that is bad sales advice number one. I don't want you to go out and close every company you talk to. It's very, very tempting to say our solution is something anybody can use. And then we wonder, hey, can actually we sell it to every single company on the planet? And the reason this idea gets in your head, no offense to my VC friends, is because the VCs told you they wanted you to build a startup with a huge total addressable market. I was with one founding team who said they're servicing the $800 billion US trucking and transportation market. That's pretty big, right? And we get excited about how big the company is. But if you actually approach your sales process this way and think, okay, we can truly sell to everybody, then we start to miss out on what I think is the greatest opportunity, which is to reverse engineer a pattern. And what I mean by that is we're not going to sell your entire TAM, your entire total addressable market. We're not even going to sell just your target market. I want you to come down and sell founder outreach, this small market. That's not just selling like your batch companies in the room. It's not just selling companies that you've met an event like this. But what I mean is I want you to do outreach to 5 companies at a time that look a lot alike. They have a similar structure, they have a similar size, they have similar geography, they have similar needs, they work in the same vertical. And when that happens, we start to find patterns. Imagine that you go and sell 5 companies that look almost exactly alike. They're all in the e-commerce space. They all sell fashion. They're all based within 10 minutes of your office from a walk. And now when we have 3 of those companies close and 2 of them don't, we can ask questions about, is this the right fit for these 2 that didn't close? Or man, do we have a really interesting pattern here where we're getting great traction? Now we expand that market a little bit more and say, let me sell 5 more companies. The trick is, and this is where I really want you to start thinking about what takeaways you'll have from today's talk, is the trick is we need to document our ideal customer profile. And that is what I've made some notes for you on today. So a good ideal customer profile touches on these things. We've written down what industry we're selling to, what funding or revenue stage they're at, some data about the company, the location, because geography often matters. I know we're usually, when we think about tech, we think, okay, doesn't matter where in the world you are, but there are some geographic restrictions, or there are some people who might need your product more based on where they're at location wise. Target buyer titles, same thing. We're going to sell to people who have buyers or people at a particular level inside the company. And then we also have this question of custom data. And this is my favorite one. I'm going to give you some examples in a minute. But the general idea of custom data is there may be something that is the biggest clue or the silver bullet to your company that makes the prospect company a really good fit. But always with your ideal customer profile, it comes down to 3 categories of information you need: demographic data, which is about the person; firmographic data about the company; and my favorite, technographic data, which is about what technologies the companies use. Okay. So in a minute, I'll give you your homework, which is to start to document your ideal customer profile. And as you do that, I want you to think about demographics, firmographics, technographics. Okay. Here's a demographic example. I want to sell to companies that have a CMO, chief marketing officer, who's been at the company longer than 2 years. I might also have some other notes about that persona. Maybe I know how senior they are. Maybe I know what experiences they've got. And maybe it may, it may be something where I also care what type of education they've got or something else that's kind of personal to that person. And the reason for doing this is if you know enough about your customer, you can make a kind of educated guess and say somebody who's been at the company 2 years as CMO has enough authority to go buy new tools. Likewise, I used to work with a startup that sold to CTOs, chief technology officers. And they said specifically they wanted to sell to CTOs that were less than 3 months on the job. That's a demographic data. Why? That's when the CTO does replatforming. They come to the company, they evaluate all the tools, and the people I was working for, they wanted to make sure they were in the consideration set for the new tools. Okay, firmographics. This is stuff about the firm. Where is it located? How many people work there? One of the big clues that I think there is around the number of people that work at a company, in the U.S. at least, if you get to about 1,000 employees, that's where the companies will set up legal and procurement. You could also say, I'm only selling to companies that have 100 employees, but more than 50. Why? Well, because I know they're going to be small enough they can make a quick decision on our technology, but yet they're big enough where if they did decide to buy for every employee, they'd have to buy at least 50 seats. That would be a good example. Firmographic. And then technographics, this is where it gets really fun. I want to target companies based on the technologies they're already using. This is not target somebody based on the fact they use your competitor. Okay. And that happens. But instead, it's, let's say you have a product that's in the Salesforce ecosystem. Since what you do is integrated to Salesforce and you think Salesforce customers are a good fit, that would be a good technographic thing. So then the ICP starts to look like I'm reaching out to chief marketing officers who've been at the company more than 2 years. That company has more than 100 employees, but less than 1,000, and they're already using Salesforce. So I know that they have a sales team, they're using Salesforce, and Salesforce is an expensive tool. So they've already also figured out how to resource sales and buy tools for sales. That makes them a perfect fit if I'm selling tools in that ecosystem. Maybe I'm selling lead gen software, right? Okay, so most of the startups that I've met, they understand who they're selling to. They have a lot of assumptions, but they haven't yet written down the ideal customer profile. Here's an example. This is like, imagine it's 2008 and you're Yelp. So you're selling to restaurants that have less than 10 employees. They're based in San Francisco or Boston. But here's the key. This is this custom data. Yelp initially targeted companies that were already advertising and they already had reviews on the Yelp platform. That meant that every potential customer they called knew something about the platform and already had figured out how to run ads, had figured out their break even on advertising. That meant that they were a good customer, right? So this is an example for you. All right, so here's your homework. I want you to write your ideal customer profile. I've sent the organizers of today's event a copy of this deck, so they'll share it with you. And before we leave to our next piece of bad advice, I'm going to give you this one last little hot tip. Most startups, when they document their ICP, they forget to set a top cap for employee count. If I tell you I can introduce you to Amazon, you think, oh my God, that's great. I really want to get into Amazon. There's 100,000 employees in the US. I don't want you to think like that. Instead, I want you to go back and think, okay, a company that has less than 1,000 employees is going to be easier to sell to. That's who I want to sell to right now. Or I'm selling enterprise software and I only want to sell to the biggest companies in the world, but I've set an upper limit or I've set a lower limit, and that's how I know if they're a good fit. So here's our next piece of bad advice from our friendly neighborhood car salesman. Just hire a VP of sales, and then you don't have to worry about sales. All right, here's the problem with that. Jason Lemkin at SaaStr tells us 70% of VPs of sales will fail. This is typically within 12 to 18 months. Worse than that, you're going to spend a lot of money hiring a VP of sales. And so in the US market, that might be $1 million mistake. And I talked to one founder who's certain it cost them $20 million evaluation for hiring the wrong revenue leader. Anybody stressed out like our friend Chuck here? It's probably good reason for that. Now, the reason that VPs of sales often fail is because the typical selling process is one that the founder is yet to discover. So what will happen is you have a VP of sales who's used to selling enterprise deals, but yet the traction your startup gets is with other startups. Somebody who's used to working with big enterprises is going to have a hard time following a selling process that isn't similar to the company they were at previously. It's very rare to have someone who can sell big deals and small deals, lots of money and less money. It's very difficult, right? So this is a typical selling process, right? And here's a typical buying process. And when you look at the difference of the two, what you'll start to see is a lot of confusion. This sales guy is very confused because the buying and selling process isn't lining up. This is how we go back to that advice on just hire a VP of sales and it'll be fine. Well, if we hire a VP of sales who's used to doing long discovery calls and then demos, then it works for what we've got lined up here. But if they're not used to selling to a company that's going to use a purchasing team or create an RFP or have to check with their boss, need to maybe do a check or a PO, purchase order. If your VP of sales is used to selling to companies who buy on credit card, like you would do for, an advertisement on Google or Facebook, well, now we're dead in the water because this person has to learn a new process around the customer. All right. So what you're going to do, this is homework number 2 from today's session. All right. What I'd like you to do is to sit down and write out how your buyer buys. Now, many of you have started your startups or you're considering going into markets where you actually would be an expert in that market, or you have a close friend who knows about this market and you've spent time with him. So your project here is to write out, how do you think that buyer is going to buy? Are they going to do their homework first? Are they going to interview 5 vendors? Are they going to sit through your demo? Are they going to come to your website and ask, for a calculator or some kind of estimator? Maybe they're going to watch a video and see what the service is like. Write out how your buyer buys, and then take another stack of post-it notes and write out your selling process. And I promise you, you will thank me for this. When you write out your selling process and it's consistent with your buying process, then you start to eliminate some of the potential errors with hiring, some of the potential errors in sales process, some of the potential errors in strategy. And we start to put our bad advice guy out of a job, which, speaking of which, here he is with our next one. Hire 2, fire 1. The idea here is that you want to build a sales team by hiring 2 sales reps, and then one of them is not going to work out, so you can go ahead and fire them. Now, there's a few problems to this, I think. Problem number 1 is that's not the way anybody wants to be treated. So now you've got a bunch of employees who are looking at you like, why do you treat people like that? Problem 2 is you send a really bad message to the rest of the team. Both the sales team is now seeing you can be fired at any moment. And you may think, okay, a little bit of fear is good for sales, but it's not good for everyone else. A little bit of fear is not good for your engineers who say, I built this thing. I think anybody can sell it. I'm really excited that this is very sellable, but 50% of our sales team gets fired within a month. Well, that says maybe not everybody can sell this. That starts to shake the confidence of the engineers, the product, the rest of the company. It also means we're going to get inconsistent data on our marketing programs, on our sales programs, because this month we've got 2 people selling, next month it's 1, then we go back and hire 2 more people and we fire one of them. It's going to take a long time to build up. And there are a lot of markets where this is actually illegal behavior too. Sales teams, though, they're changing. They're not what you might imagine that we're going to have this guy come off the used car lot and then start working with us. This is my sales team at Checkmate. We had a great outcome at this company. They sold to Trust You. They also sold their technology to Google. But our sales team was a little different than what you might picture a typical sales team to look like. We had a chunk of our team was coming from top tier schools. We had a professional opera singer, US Olympian, somebody who just graduated MBA, and a pro cyclist who raced against Lance Armstrong. These aren't your typical salespeople anymore. People are seeing, hey, smart, dedicated professionals are saying sales is a cool career. I want to go try this. And these are people who are going to join you in the experiment and be critical thinkers, as opposed to, okay, I'm going to try this for a month and I'll get fired if it doesn't work. That we want to get away from. Okay. Now, if you've done your work on process, the next piece to think about, and this is a little sidebar, is thinking through how your process is owned by your salespeople. All right. So I've written out an example here for you that you can think about a little bit and talk to the team about when you look at this deck later. But essentially, if the first step in sales is to qualify the customer, the next being do a call, do some discovery, learn about each other, share a little bit about your tools, learn about what they need, and then schedule a demo. That demo, you're going to show them how the product works, potentially ask some questions, and then get back on the phone and validate, hey, does this fit? Then we talk to the executive who's going to be doing the buying. They say, hey, everything looks good. And then we do a closing call. You'll see the pictures on the bottom here with this sales process. This process is grouped by who is owning that stage. And in this case, a sales development rep who's setting the appointment, a sales rep who's going to do the discovery call and the demo, a sales engineer who might get on with the IT team and do technical validation, and then back to our sales account executive who's going to do the closing. Some of these people are joining the calls with each other. This is not a one size fits all process. This is not the process I want you to hit print and then put it on the wall and say, this is your process. I want you to go back and really dig into this piece here where you're writing your buying process, writing your selling process, and we're getting out of some of these bad habits. And once you have your process, you can say, who does our customer want to talk to? If your customer wants to talk to a sales engineer, then I want you to have a sales engineer that's available to connect with them. If your buyer wants a demo before anything else happens, well, maybe we take this SDR process out and have the sales engineer do the demo, or have a sales account executive do a demo at the very beginning. And then we get into some qualification or next steps. This will be custom to you and your process. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense. And as you go through this, again, we want to watch out for any of our bad advice guys. All right. So here's the last piece of bad advice. And then we're going to have some time for questions if you'd like. So, bad advice guy says just land and expand. Sell a small customer on a small amount. They'll like your product and they'll spend more money. Now we go back to the VC and say, look, magically we're at $1 million ARR because we've got 100 customers. They're all spending more than when we close them for their pilots. This is a dream scenario that everybody wants, but it's actually really hard to think this way because your first customers may not be the best customers to close. And bad customers kill startups. So here's what I want you to think about. Your first 5 customers, how do they become your best friends? Remember, we've already prospected 5 customers that have a lot in common. And we've gone and closed our initial customers based on they're all transportation firms in the southeastern United States with 50 employees, and they didn't have a procurement process, but they did have an executive. They bought with their credit card, so it's going to automatically renew. They have a lot in common. And then, of course, insert your, the criteria that makes sense for your startup. But if that's who we've sold to, then those first 5 or 6 customers, we make them our best friends. We're going to learn a lot about how they're using the tool. What are the other things they buy? We're going to get in and see, are they using the tool the way we want them using the tool, right? And when we do that, we start to learn a heck of a lot, and then we can take it back into our sales process, right? I want you to make sure that every single person in that customer account understands the value that your tool is bringing them. Okay. So if you want to do land and expand and you want to do it the right way, as opposed to, oh, it'll all work out, here are 5 steps. And you can come revisit these later. We want to identify the target accounts. We want to identify the type of expansion. Is it going to be new business, or is it going to be adding more seats, or is it going to be selling to a new department, right? We want to map out the organization and then identify, all right, client priorities, and we're going to work the process. Here's a quick little exercise you can do if you want to think about if a customer is right for expansion. Here I've got 4 logos of potential customers. And if you look at this, you go, okay, well, I recognize Coke. They're a big company. I know they're a big international company. So they must be our biggest account. If I take a grid and I say, okay, how much do they spend and are they using the product the right way? Meaning, are they using the product the way that I think most of our successful customers will use it? If we group them like this, well, what does that say? Coke is spending a lot of money because they're very big, but they're not actually using the whole product. Maybe I've got an accounting product and they're using it for accounting for days off for their delivery drivers. Whereas Instacart may not be spending a lot of money, but they're using the product exactly the way we envisioned it. So they might be a better fit for expansion, right? Then we're going to write out our sales process, draw the expansion, figure out who in the organization is going to be a good fit. And now we've got a true expansion process. This actually, by the way, is a real deal. So I made up the name of a company and I changed all their pictures, but I'll tell you because we're all friends that this is a $350,000 renewal when we sold into Box. Box is a big company. They had a lot going on. I was at a 500 back company that was a data startup in Berkeley, California, and we went down to try to map out our expansion deal. And in that case, it was actually signed by this person, Christina, that you see in the middle of the picture. That's not her real name, but she was the decision maker for our expansion deal. And this is the real org chart. We had two big empty questions for people that we didn't know if we'd be able to sell to them, if they would influence our deal, if that was positive or negative, and we mapped it out the best we could. Greg Carson in the bottom, he was going to be our regular user and doing the, and advocating for why we needed more budget. But he had a peer in marketing who didn't like us and we didn't know their name. So that's why there's a blank in the bottom right of your screen. So I hope that's fun to look at. We've spent 20 minutes together so far, and I wanted to see if you'd like to, we've been 25 minutes at this point, and I wanted to see if you'd like to maybe ask some questions. So I reserved a chunk of time for Q&A. And I don't know how the team there wants to do it. I don't have a great view of where you are, who you are, but if you'd like to do some Q&A, now would be a great time for it. Anybody have any questions?
Hi, my name is Jersey. I work at Junifies. It's a startup based in San Francisco. So we do user-centric focus session management for IT department, and it's a B2B solutions. So my question is, when you do the B2B sales, and we all know we all probably start from the connection, but the B2B sales, majority part is people, but what happens if that organization has the politics problem? So for example, your contact window, like you have been working for a while, but at some point it actually got chopped or there's some politics fights in that company. What would you do? Because they probably would affect your sales at the time when that happens. So any advice for that scenarios?
I'm sorry to interrupt you. It's actually really hard for me to hear what the question is. So Amber, is there a way that you can help out with maybe repeating the question closer to the computer?
Yeah. Would you mind coming over and repeat your question again to the?
Oh yeah, we can do like a little question booth. Come over and ask a question up close.
Hello. Oh, yes. Hi. So my question is.
Much better audio.
I'll just repeat again. When your contact window in your customers' organizations actually run into the politics fights, and that team, the decision-making team, is actually has the risk got chopped, or it has been chopped, and the new person or your new contact window has the different direction of the decisions.
Yes.
Then how would you handle the situations?
This happens more often. The larger the company is you sell to, the more likely it is that you're going to run into a challenge like this. And so it's a great question, especially when we talk about enterprise. The number one thing is we want to look for people inside the company who are trying to make this happen. Oftentimes we think about looking for the buyer's pain or pain points. So if you get to know the account and you discover that somebody is having a problem that you can solve with your tool or your tech, we want to get close to that person and understand how deep does this problem go. So let's say you're selling some software to the HR organization and you find out the problem that your main buyer that you're prospecting into, they say this problem exists for every team in every country, and it's a big multinational organization. I would work as quick as you can to get intros to other people who have the problem, understand what the impact of that problem is, and then be able to go to a senior leader and say, look, I've talked to 20 HR leaders, one for every country you service, and this is costing about $100,000 in each place, but our software can help fix that. Now, that's just a rough example, but that's what I want you to do is I want you to connect with as many people as you can, because every new person that you meet and you show value to, that person's insurance that you won't lose traction in your deal.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was a great question. Grace, you want to find one more and then we'll wrap, or I can stay and hang out for as long as you want.
Hi, my name is Chiwei. I'm an engineer by training. Hey, and so I have a question. So I never actually interviewed any salesperson before. So what should I look for and what kind of question?
Interview me.
Yeah. So I guess like what kind of question could be a good question to ask them to share. Typically I assume they are better sales than self as well. So how do I know they are good sales? Yeah.
All right. So have a look at this slide real quick. We're not thinking about how do we hire the people who are best at sales. If you look at this slide across the bottom is what the buyer is doing, right? The buyer is doing due diligence. They're making the case. They're looking at a demo. Then we need to find salespeople who are really good at doing demos, because that's important to our buyer. I'll tell you another quick story about a client I have here in the US. She sells a medical technology to hospitals, and the main buyer is a doctor, but there's no doctor on the startup team. So that presents a real challenge because the doctor wants to buy from other doctors. So who would she hire? Somebody who's the next best thing, as close as you can get to a doctor, somebody who's worked around healthcare. They've sold other organizations. They know the tools. They know the language. Maybe it's somebody who used to be a doctor but wants to work in startups because they love tech, right? The same thing could be true about other professions. Maybe you've got a legal tool. So you hire somebody who used to be a lawyer, used to be a paralegal, and now they work in this, right? So that's how I want you to think about this. Now, I'll give you asked for like, what are some easy questions to know if somebody is good? And I'll give you, do you want my favorite sales interview question?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. My favorite sales interview question is probably not what you're expecting, but I like to ask salespeople, tell me the story about a time you gave a customer bad news. Because when we get bad news in a work context, that story will tell you about this person's motivations, their ethics, their morals. Let's say you ask me that question. And I say, oh, well, here was a time that, we did something the customer didn't like, but I convinced them to stay with us. That sounds like a manipulator. Here's a time that we saw that we did a problem. The customer didn't see the problem. So I called them and I said, hey, look, you need to open up your account window right now and see that we made a huge mistake. I wanted you to hear it from me instead of finding it on your own and getting in trouble with your boss. That's a different kind of person. That's the person I want on my sales team. So hopefully that helps you as you think about finding the right salespeople. It's really 3 guiding principles. Do they fit culturally to the organization you're trying to build? Meaning they answer that question about giving customers bad news or something like it, and it fits for you. They have worked with companies that are at the same size. They buy at the same pace. So if you think that your big companies are going to take 6 months to buy something, they're really good at this. The last question we had was about big organizations where you have different buying people. Then I would run that question. If that's your company, I would ask a potential sales rep, how would you deal with this problem of a buyer who's leaving? And if they don't say, I'm really used to talking to 20 decision makers, they're not the right fit for that company. Now, if you're selling something that one person buys on a credit card for their one department, and maybe it's $10,000 or less, that's very transactional. So I want to hire a sales rep who can be transactional. Usually that's athletes who know how to grind, make 100 calls, get 10 deals done, go home, and then come back and do it the next day. Hope that helps.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So every startup in the room has a product roadmap of some kind, but most startups don't have a revenue roadmap. And I put this slide in so that in the deck, after you get it from the team, you'll see how I think about putting your revenue plan together. A revenue roadmap is going to answer at least these 5 questions. Who do you sell to? How do you sell to them? When it works, how do you grow accounts? And then who is on your team? This is the last question we had about hiring. We want to build a process and hire the people that our customers actually want to talk to. And then we want to document what experiments we're going to run and then who's going to own them. This is the revenue roadmap, and I see it as the key to all startup sales success. Again, here's our bad advice guy. He says, always be closing. We're not going to do that. Just hire a VP of sales. Nope, you're better founders than that. You're going to stay close to the problem. Hire 2, fire 1. Absolutely not. Just land and expand. Well, yeah, I want you to do land and expand, but I don't want you to bank on it and think it's going to happen on its own. So if you leave this talk and you're still Googling, how do I do startup sales? I'm really, really hopeful that this Google search takes you to my newest project, which is on YouTube. So if you go to youtube.com/@JRyanWilliams, you'll find my new channel, How to Do Startup Sales. We're interviewing sales leaders from around the world about how they've had successes. I just did an interview I haven't posted yet with somebody who did Alibaba's cloud services largest North America deal. So he's the sales rep who did an $8.7 million deal, talking to 20 people within that account. People came and left, just like the question that we had today. And he still got through it and got the CEO of his prospect to sign the deal. So we're talking to people like that on the channel. Those videos will start to drop. And then you'll see talks like the one we did today, but just me in the basement without a lot of questions. But I'm recording the lessons I've learned over 12 years as a sales leader, and hopefully they're helpful to you. So please consider connecting with me there or reach out directly if you'd like.
Right. Thank you, Ryan, for the insightful sharing. And then I think Ryan left his LinkedIn profile or LinkedIn link in the deck, so we can share it with everyone for those of you who would like to connect. So yeah, let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.